Over 49 experiments, let that sink in. That's how many mind control tests the CIA conducted under the veil of secrecy, without most people ever knowing. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you thought was real could be manipulated, altered, controlled by someone else. It sounds like the stuff of dystopian sci-fi, but this was real life. The CIA, a branch of government sworn to protect its people, was deeply invested in controlling their minds. For those of us who walk a spiritual path, that is horrifying. The mind, the seat of the soul, was treated like a machine that could be rewired, tinkered with, bent to the will of others. The question that haunts us is, how did we allow this to happen? And perhaps more importantly, why? The story of the CIA's mind control programs like MKUltra is more than just history. It's a warning, a reminder that the forces who wish to dominate us are always out there, lurking in the shadows. In the 1950s, when fear was running rampant during the Cold War, the agency thought they'd found the ultimate weapon. Not bombs or guns, but the ability to manipulate the very thing that defines who we are, our consciousness. MKUltra kicked off in 1953, fueled by the paranoia of the Cold War. The CIA wasn't just fighting to win an arms race. They were trying to win the battle of ideas, hearts, and minds. The dream was to find a way to bend the human psyche, to control thoughts, memories, and behaviors. And they didn't care who got hurt along the way. At the core of spiritual practice, there's a deep respect for the sacred nature of the mind. The mind isn't just a biological tool for thinking. It's where we connect with the divine, where we find clarity, purpose, and our true selves. But MKUltra was like something out of a nightmare, a calculated attempt to take control of that sacred space. The tools they use sound like the makings of a bad trip. LSD, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, isolation. They weren't just trying to learn how to control behavior. They were trying to completely unravel a person's sense of self. They were trying to tap into the deep recesses of the mind, to take over that part of you that's supposed to remain untouched by the outside world. It wasn't just a few rogue scientists either. More than 80 institutions were involved. Universities, hospitals, prisons, even pharmaceutical companies. The experiments ranged from psychological torture to powerful drugs like LSD. It wasn't just happening in dark basements and secret labs. People in regular hospitals were being used like guinea pigs without even knowing it. Can you imagine? You're going to the doctor thinking you're getting treated for some illness, and instead, you're part of some grand, twisted experiment. All because the government wanted to figure out how to break minds apart and rebuild them in whatever shape they chose. LSD was a favorite tool. You know, back in the day, they didn't really understand what it could do. They figured it was just a drug that could alter perception. What they didn't expect was how deep it could take people, into their fears, into their traumas, into places in their minds that most of us never consciously visit. The CIA wanted to use that, not to help people heal, but to see if they could rewire those parts of the brain for their own agenda. It's the exact opposite of what spiritual seekers do. Where we seek to heal the mind and open it up, they were looking to break it down and control it. One of the worst parts of all this is that many of the people experimented on never even knew what was happening to them. They were just pawns in a bigger game, and the effects were often disastrous. Some people never fully recovered from the mental and emotional damage inflicted upon them. Others lost their sense of reality altogether. And all of this was happening under the radar. Can you imagine what that does to someone's spiritual path? When the very essence of your being, your mind, is twisted by forces beyond your control, how do you come back from that? And it gets worse. One of the most famous cases from MKUltra was Frank Olsen. He was a biochemist for the US Army, and he was one of the few people on the inside of these experiments. But in 1953, without his knowledge, the CIA spiked his drink with LSD. Frank started spiraling, paranoia, hallucinations, losing his grip on reality. Days later, he fell from the 10th floor of a hotel in New York City. The official story? Suicide. But over the years, doubts crept in, and whispers grew louder that maybe, just maybe, Frank didn't jump. Maybe he was pushed. A man who knew too much, a mind too far gone, too much of a liability. To spiritual thinkers, Frank's story is tragic on many levels. Here was a man whose mind was shattered by forces he couldn't control. In a world where we seek enlightenment and connection, his path was derailed by dark forces who saw the mind as nothing more than a tool. His story haunts us because it reminds us how fragile the mind can be, and how dangerous it is when the wrong people get their hands on it. But the true horror of MKUltra is that it wasn't just a blip in history. It was part of a larger pattern, a pattern that reveals just how much some powers want control over what should be untouchable. And even after MKUltra was officially shut down, the truth didn't fully come out for decades. In 1973, the CIA, realizing they were about to be caught, destroyed thousands of documents related to the program. It wasn't until the Church Committee hearings in 1975 that the full scope of the horror started to become public. And even then, a lot of questions went unanswered. Here's what's so spiritually disturbing about this whole thing. For centuries, humanity has been on a quest to understand the mind. Ancient yogis, mystics, and spiritual leaders have spent their lives meditating, seeking enlightenment, exploring the vast landscape of consciousness. They've always known that the mind is powerful, far more powerful than most people realize. And yet, here was an institution taking that same power, but instead of using it to elevate the human experience, they were trying to weaponize it. The CIA wasn't seeking enlightenment, they were seeking control. In doing so, they violated something sacred. They took something beautiful, the human mind's limitless potential, and tried to reduce it to something they could manipulate, twist, and bend to their will. For those of us who believe in the power of the mind to connect us to higher realms, to each other, to the universe, this is one of the darkest betrayals imaginable. The ethics of this go beyond just governmental overreach. This is a spiritual violation. MKUltra was an assault on the very nature of free will, a cornerstone of what it means to be human. In spirituality, free will is what allows us to seek higher truths, to explore our connection to the divine, to make choices that align with our highest good. When free will is taken away, especially through mind control, we are robbed of the essence of who we are. It's no wonder that, to this day, MKUltra continues to cast a long shadow. As we look around at modern society, we see echoes of the same desire for control, not just from governments, but from corporations, social media platforms, and countless other forces trying to influence how we think, how we feel, what we believe. It's the same battle for the human mind, just in a different form. For those on a spiritual path, understanding the full scope of what happened with MKUltra is essential. It's not just a story of government secrecy, it's a story about the dangers of losing touch with the sacred. It's a reminder that we must always be vigilant in protecting our minds, in keeping our thoughts and our souls free from those who would seek to control them. Even though MKUltra officially ended, the spirit of those experiments lingers. It's in the manipulation of media, the subtle ways our thoughts and beliefs are influenced, the ongoing tug-of-war for control over how we see the world. And if there's one thing we can learn from this dark chapter in history, it's that the mind is too sacred, too powerful, to be handed over to anyone else. So, where does that leave us today? We're at a crossroads, where the tools of manipulation are more advanced than ever before, but we also have more awareness. As spiritual seekers, we can take this knowledge and use it to guard ourselves, to protect our minds from those who would seek to control them. We can strengthen our connection to the divine, to our higher selves, and ensure that our path is one we choose, not one that is chosen for us. The story of MKUltra is not just a cautionary tale from the past. It's a reminder of what can happen when we lose sight of the sanctity of the mind. It's a call to remain vigilant, to honor the freedom of thought and spirit, and to always be mindful of those who would seek to take that freedom away. In the end, the mind is a sacred space, a gateway to the divine, and while there will always be those who try to control it, the true power lies within each of us to protect that space, to cultivate it, and to use it as a tool for enlightenment, for connection, and for freedom. The story of MKUltra is dark, yes, but it also shines a light on the importance of reclaiming our minds, our spirits, and our souls from those who would seek to enslave them.